In this week's Bizline, Vietnam faces tough competition in FDI attraction, and Vietnam needs to adjust policy to adapt to global minimum tax or GMT. Hello there, you're tuning into Bizline on VTV International. New data published by the General Statistics Office of Vietnam has shown that due to the absence of large projects, registered capital and disbursement of foreign investment capital (FDI) in the first quarter of this year both decreased compared to the same period in 2022. FDI inflows into Vietnam weakened for many reasons, including new investment plans and production expansion being affected by global economic uncertainty. In addition, according to experts, the competition to attract foreign investment between Vietnam and other countries in the region has become increasingly fierce. Currently, Vietnam is using tax incentives as a financial leverage tool to attract foreign investors. As such, the introduction of the global minimum tax would create challenges for FDI attraction of many countries. So what will Vietnam's biggest challenges be in attracting FDI, and what solutions should be taken to handle the difficulties and maintain Vietnam's position in attracting FDI compared to other regional countries? This is also the focus of this week's Bizline. But first, let's take a look at the following video.
As of the end of the first quarter of 2023, the total newly registered, adjusted, and contributed capital to buy shares of foreign investors had reached nearly $5.45 billion, a 38.8% decrease over the same period last year.
So I believe companies are a little cautious about spending big money. The increased project, meaning that companies remain highly motivated to invest, but the scale of investment per project has become smaller.
The introduction of a global minimum tax will create challenges for Vietnam's FDI attraction. In order to adapt to this new tax policy, many countries are studying the use of the domestic minimum additional tax. Vietnam is falling behind in the competition.
Also, Vietnam needs the income and also the tax inflow from foreign investors. And I think, at least for German investors, I know exactly that everybody has to build the business case for Vietnam without tax incentives, without tax holidays, without any exemptions.
Điều họ quan tâm sẽ là trả phần thuế đó ở quốc gia nơi đặt công ty mẹ hay là tại nơi họ đang hoạt động. Việt Nam nếu chậm triển khai, không chỉ bị mất khoản chênh lệch này, mà cùng với đó là lợi thế cạnh tranh cũng bị ảnh hưởng. Trước mắt, cần sớm tính toán và triển khai thuế tối thiểu nội địa để giành quyền thu thuế trước.
In the region, Indonesia has become a formidable rival for Vietnam. As in recent years, the country has launched many new policies to welcome the shifting of investment capital. Thailand is also an attractive investment location. As competitive pressure gets fiercer, Vietnam is being forced to go faster in the race to attract foreign investment.
To discuss this issue, we invited Mr. Bùi Ngọc Tuấn, tax partner Deloitte Vietnam, and connecting online with us, we would like to introduce Mr. Thomas McClellan, Chair of the Taxation and Transfer Pricing Sector Committee, European Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam, or EuroCham. Well, thank you to both of our guests for being here with us. New data released by the Foreign Investment Department under the Ministry of Planning and Investment shows that as of the end of the first quarter of 2023, the total newly registered, adjusted and contributed capital to buy shares of foreign investors has reached nearly $5.45 billion, equaling 61.2% over the same period. So what do you think are the factors that cause this decline?
Yes, I think there could be at least a couple of reasons for the decline. One of these is that after COVID-19, I think was a significant decline in global investment generally. I think investors have become more cautious in making business expansions. They've been anticipating that there's a global downturn due to high inflation, increased interest rates as a reaction to that. and the global energy crisis due to the Ukraine-Russia conflict. So I think that in that context, they're not the priorities of the largest companies are to focus on their core business, transforming their talent, other service and market innovations, artificial intelligence, supply chain resilience, rather than looking at expanding their businesses. And I think that might be an impact on the new investment in Vietnam in the first quarter.
Many experts believe that investment from EU countries, Japan, South Korea, and other countries will collect additional taxes, most likely starting from 2024. Along with that, there will be a shift in investment flows that countries start applying the global minimum tax of 15% starting next year. So how will this affect Vietnam?
Starting from 2024, a lot of countries in the world, especially in the developed country, they have the right to collect the minimum effective tax rate at 15% on the global consolidated revenue of that corporation. So for what we call the in scope, and it is under the resolution we call the Pillar 2 resolution or the Pillar 2 regime. So for any corporation falling under the Pillar 2 regime, then they on annual basis, if their annual revenue is above from 750 million euro and above, then they have to pay 15%, 15%, because of the minimum. And so it has impact not only for Vietnam, but in a lot of countries where those corporations are investing, especially in like tax haven countries or the low income tax country. So technically, for example, in Vietnam, if a company is currently enjoying the tax incentive scheme from the Vietnam government, and they are paying, for example, 5%, the effective tax rate is 5%. So from 2024, when the GMT is implemented globally, then technically they have to pay that differences from 15% to 5%, which is 10%, back to the country where they headquartered. Yeah, and so that's make quite big impact to Vietnam.
The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, has published its final guidelines on how to include a global minimum tax in legislation. Accordingly, multinational companies and corporations will be subject to a global minimum tax rate of 15%, regardless of whether they operate in any country. Currently, 140 countries have committed to this tax regulation. Thus, Vietnam will lose its advantage of attracting investment through tax incentive scheme. It is now urgent to come up with a solution for this soon to mitigate the impact of foreign investment by the imposition of the global minimum tax.
According to the OECD's Pillar 2 global minimum tax, multinational enterprises and corporations will be subject to a corporate income tax of at least 15%. This tax applies to any country in which the business or its subsidiary operates.
Sớm lợi đột hóa vấn đề trụ cột 2 mà đỡ giảm ảnh hưởng về những công ty đã đầu tư hiện nay, cũng như là có thể làm cho an toàn và yên tâm cho các nhà đầu tư lớn đang quan tâm đầu tư vào Việt Nam.
Though the standard tax rate is 20%, FDI enterprises pay an actual average preferential rate of 12.3%, with some large corporations only having to pay a few percent.
Well, now Vietnam's corporate income tax rate is 20%, which is average among ASEAN countries. And many foreign companies in Vietnam are granted a 15-year tax deduction or exemption under certain conditions. So with the introduction of the 15% global minimum tax, this benefit will in effect no longer be granted. So Vietnam needs to consider subsidies or other incentives to supplement, to counter the situation. And the competition is the same among ASEAN countries.
According to experts, the effectiveness of investment incentive policies will be reduced. This affects enterprises' ability to attract new investment projects or foreign businesses considering expanding investments. As such, Vietnam needs to strengthen its competitive advantages.
Of course, you are in a competition with other countries in the same region, with countries in other regions as well. And I'm totally sure you will always find another country offering better tax incentives than you. And therefore you have to find other ways. So strengthen the Vietnamese companies that they can be a good cooperation partner for foreign investment here in the country. This is also very, very important. And last but not least, also to strengthen the green energy sources.
Other countries receiving large investments, such as Indonesia, Malaysia, are also proactively preparing for the official application of the global minimum tax policy next year. For this reason, Vietnam should take urgent action to retain its competitiveness and ensure the benefits of both the state and investors.
It is clear that the introduction of GMT will create challenges for Vietnam's FDI attraction. If Vietnam delay in responding, Vietnam may lose the right to collect tax. So in order to adapt to the new tax policy, many countries are considering to apply the domestic minimum tax. So in your opinion, should Vietnam apply this policy?
OECD allow the country, for example, Vietnam, to take the right to collect that differences. And they call it the Qualified Domestic Top-Up Tax, QDMTT, Minimum Top-Up Tax, QDMTT. And that is the mechanism that allow the country like Vietnam to collect the taxes of the subsidies of the in-scope corporation. Have to pay back to the headquarters, and Vietnam will collect that instead of they paying back to the headquarters.
So Vietnam should adopt QDMTT, in our view, rather than any other form of domestic minimum tax. The application of QDMTT should eliminate the additional top-up taxes in the parent company jurisdiction due to its consistent calculation basis, and ensure that multinational groups are not overtaxed, as well as saving those groups compliance costs by using the consistent system along with other companies in the group. I think that this also shows that Vietnam is integrated with the global economy and integrated with international taxation principles.
The Vietnamese government offers a wide range of tax incentives to draw foreign investment into the country. However, when the global minimum tax is implemented, these tax incentives will no longer be attractive. So what solution does Vietnam need to attract more FDI investors, especially for high-quality projects?
With respect to large investors, going forward, income tax incentives will not be a factor in making an investment decision when they compare different countries, including Vietnam as an investment destination. I think this is not the case with respect to Vietnam, which has several other positive factors in terms of the overall business environment. There are areas that continue to be improved, such as infrastructure and the regulatory framework. The Vietnam government should continue to enhance investment in the business environment with clear and more consistent legislative systems and cutting down on the burden of unnecessary administrative procedures. In addition, improvements in infrastructure and logistics, quality of labour, effective supporting industries, especially for attracting large-scale projects, should be focused on in the time to come.
Vietnam can consider applying what they call the qualified refundable tax credit mechanism, which means that they would allow the company to get deduction of the certain type of expenses, but it will be credited against the future tax liability for the company. So in a long-term review, there may be less impact in terms of cash flows for the companies. Even maybe in the first couple of years, they may have to pay up the top-up tax, but in return, in the coming years, they will get credited from the tax liability that they may have to pay.
According to the global minimum tax mechanism, multinational enterprises with annual global consolidated revenue of at least 750 million euros or 806 million US dollars will be subject to a minimum tax rate of 15% from the beginning of 2024. In the country where their subsidiaries pay a lower tax rate, they will have to pay the remaining shortfall to the country in which they are headquartered. Thus, if Vietnam participate in this mechanism and declare to adopt the GMT mechanism, it should amend at least 3 laws and adjust its investment policy as soon as possible.
Even if Vietnam issues new policies to support the investment environment, it will still have to amend its law on investment, law on enterprises, law on corporate income tax, and other relevant regulations. Currently, there are 36,500 foreign invested projects nationwide, of which more than 1,000 large enterprises and thousands of satellite enterprises will be affected by the global minimum tax. According to the Ministry of Finance, the global minimum corporate income tax will help the budget earn 500 million to 1 billion US dollars more to support FDI enterprises.
Cần sự phối hợp của Bộ Tài chính, Bộ Kế hoạch Đầu tư, Bộ Công Thương để rà soát các biện pháp hỗ trợ của doanh nghiệp. Ví dụ như hỗ trợ cho việc về vấn đề cơ sở hạ tầng cho các doanh nghiệp lớn đầu tư tại Việt Nam, hỗ trợ cho việc mua sắm các cái trang thiết bị, tài sản cố định đầu tư ban đầu của doanh nghiệp.
About 146 countries commit to apply the GMT from 2024. As such, if Vietnam participates in this mechanism, we need to consider and conduct timely and appropriate measures to encourage investors to maintain and expand their operations in Vietnam.
Opinion is the GMT a filter that would help Vietnam choose good FDI projects, or it will create a new race for regional country to attract FDI?
In terms of attracting foreign investment, there are different ways. And in a lot of surveys by Vietnam government to the foreign investor, tax incentive is one of the, of course it is important and one of the key factors, but it's not the only factors. Yeah, because before coming into a country like Vietnam, normally the foreign investor should look at different angles. First, they will consider about the social economy, about the political situation, about the location of the country, and then they look at other what we call the infrastructure, about the transportation, logistic, the quality of the local trainee workers, and a lot of things, and so together with the reformation of the tax incentive that we are talking about when implementing the GMT in Vietnam, then the government is also considering to improve some of the other factors that normally the foreign investor would consider when they come into Vietnam.
Now, in addition to the GMT, many countries in the Asia-Pacific region have also increased their significant competitive advantage over Vietnam in attracting foreign capital. What do you think about this?
Vietnam still ranked as an attractive destination for foreign investments in Asia. I think, however, with the increasing uncertainty and rapid changes in the global economy, Vietnam has to aggressively compete with many other countries in Asia Pacific in attracting foreign investment. So there are a few things that we suggest that Vietnam can improve its competitive advantage for foreign investment, in particular focusing on at least the following factors. The first is in terms of the quality of labour. Therefore, the labour workforce should be significantly and quickly either upskilled or reskilled to adapt with rapid technological developments or new production business methodologies. I think the second thing, which is I think widely recognised, is that the quality of infrastructure and logistics should be significantly improved to meet the requirements for large-scale projects with complex production lines and high-tech application. I think that the costs of logistics in Vietnam are still higher than in countries such as China, the Philippines, and Thailand, for example.
What is Vietnam's advantage in this competition?
I think it's generally recognized that FDI attraction does not solely depend on tax incentives. And Vietnam has many advantages, which include consistent track record of high economic and market growth, a stable political system, a young, skilled, and cost-competitive workforce, numerous free trade agreements, as well as double tax agreements as well. So I think there are many factors that Vietnam has over other countries. I was on a call actually with several countries, tax administrations in the OECD, and there was a leader of a tax administration in an African country, and he said, well, you criticize us in terms of tax incentives, but we don't have anything else. We don't have anything else to offer. But that's not the case with Vietnam. Vietnam has many other things to offer for FDI attraction.
Processing and manufacturing attracted the largest amount of foreign investment capital in the first 3 months of 2023, with nearly $4 billion, accounting for 73% of the total registered capital. Notably, more high-quality and tech projects have received investment instead of those that require a high number of labor.
Vietnam is no longer just a low-cost producer, but rather will start to encompass more of its capabilities to include high-quality products. Some of this transition is already happening. This means that higher value goods are being manufactured and distributed out of Vietnam.
Japan is a long-standing trade partner of Vietnam, and companies such as camera giant Canon has tripled the size of their local operations. South Korea has also increased their investment in Vietnam. Samsung alone has brought in nearly $18 billion into the country. European companies, attracted by favorable policies and incentives, have also shown a keen interest in Vietnam.
Healthy manufacturing ecosystem. And this has been created and whereby increasingly the giant tech companies, the manufacturing companies, they're bringing in their global suppliers into Vietnam. Secondly, there's also increasing number of R&D centers that are being set up by these large tech companies as well. And this not only helps out on building out the ecosystem, but also helps to scale up the local, the talents in Vietnam.
However, the world's unstable geopolitical situation has reduced business and investment confidence, indirectly affecting FDI inflows into Vietnam. Besides, Vietnam agreed to apply a global corporate minimum tax of 15%. Thus, multinational companies will be subject to this rate instead of the current average preferential rate of 12.3%. This also puts Vietnam in a difficult position in continuing to retain and attract FDI enterprises. Experts and businesses recommend that Vietnam needs more improvements in its financial structure, human resources, and infrastructure to maintain its attractiveness.
Vietnam could be part of the supply chain of Swiss companies in the region. This is the challenge for Vietnam, to be able to attract more and more talent, to develop a qualified workforce in order to be able to attract more companies investing in technology.
Experts also suggest Vietnam provide more clean land, review electricity planning, and have policies to develop supporting industries in the coming time.
Now, will Vietnam continue to maintain its leading position in attracting FDI in the ASEAN region in the coming time?
We believe that Vietnam is still very attractive, to a lot of foreign investors coming into Vietnam, and so far with the support from the government, Vietnam has been improving a lot in terms of, training the workers, make them more skillful, things like that, and they can develop a more quality workforce, ready to welcome, the new or the expanding foreign investors coming into Vietnam. I'm sure that, the overall investment environment in Vietnam will be stable and even much better if the reformation of the investment policy in Vietnam will be improved in the coming time.
Vietnam is a leader in terms of renewable energy, for example. I think it was in 2021 the largest investment in Vietnam was from a European country was from Lego. And as I understand it, it's been public that the main reason that they decided to come to Vietnam compared to another country was that was the government's policies in respect of renewable energy, and they were able to achieve a carbon neutral factory. So it wasn't tax factors. So I think there are a lot of other positive factors in terms of the environment and government policy in Vietnam, which will mean that it remains a leader in the region.
Well, once again, thank you to both of our guests for being here with us. Now, the current tax incentive scheme will be less effective when the GMT is implemented in Vietnam. It is forecast that more than 1,000 FDI enterprises will be affected, with the number expected to increase, including large investors and their subsidiaries. However, experts also believe that the quality of the investment environment is more important than tax incentives. The global minimum tax is also expected to end the race for tax incentives in attracting FDI, making good use of this opportunity while improving business environment, infrastructure, and redesigning the system of preferential policies to attract investment will create many opportunities for Vietnam to attract FDI, especially high-quality FDI. This will also improve Vietnam's competitiveness with other countries in the region. And on that note, we wrap up this edition of BizLine. Stay with us for more content, or if you're on the go, feel free to download our app VTV Go from App Store or Google Play, or subscribe to our YouTube channel VTV4 Go. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time.